Chapter 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor. Too much circulation makes the price go down. The more you are seen and heard from, the more common you appear. If you are already established in a group, temporarily withdraw from it will make you more talked about, even more admired. You must learn when to leave. Create value through scarcity. Sir Guillaume de Beaune was Trotter who roamed the south of France in the Middle Ages, going from castle to castle, reciting poetry and playing the perfect knight. At the castle of Javik, he met and fell in love with this beautiful lady of the house, Madame Guillaume de Beaune. He sang her songs, recited his poetry, played chess with her, and little by little, she in turn fell in love with him. G had a friend named Sir Pierre, who traveled with him and who was also at the castle. And Pierre, too, fell in love with a lady, J. The gracious but temperamental Vernetta. Then one day, Pierre and V had a violent quarrel. The lady dismissed him and sought out to his friend G to help heal the breach and get him back in good graces. G was about to leave the castle for a while, but on his return several weeks later, he worked his magic and P, the lady were reconciled. Pierre felt that his love had increased tenfold, that there was no stronger love, in fact, than a love that follows reconciliation. The stronger and longer the disagreement, he told G, the sweeter the feeling that comes with peace and rapprochement. As a troubadour, Sir G prided himself on experiencing all the joys and sorrows of love. Of hearing his friends talk, he too wanted to know the bliss of reconciliation after a quarrel. He therefore, far in great anger with Lady G, stopped sending her letters and abruptly left the castle and stayed away, even during the festivals and hunts. This drove the young lady wild. G sent messenger to G to find out what had happened, but he turned the messenger away. He thought all this would make her angry, forcing him to plead for his reconciliation as Pierre had. Instead, however, his absence had the opposite effect, and it made G-Ma love him all the more. Now the lady pursued her knight, sending messengers and love notes of her own. This was almost unheard of. A lady never pursued her troubadour. And Me did not like it. Jima forwardness made him feel she had lost some of her dignity. Not only was he no longer sure of his plan, he was no longer sure of his lady. Finally, after several months of hearing from Jima gave up. She sent him no more messengers and began to wonder, perhaps she was angry. Perhaps the plan had worked after all. So much the better if she was. He would wait no more. It was simple. It was time to reconcile. So he put on the best robe, decked the horse in his fancies, caparison, chose a magnificent helmet, and rode off to Javik. On hearing that her beloved had returned to Jima, brushed to see him, knelt before him, dropped her veil to kiss him, and begged forgiveness for whatever slight had caused his anger. Imagine his confusion and despair. His plan had failed abysmally. She was not angry. She had never been angry. She was only deeper in love. And he would never experience the joy of reconciliation after a quarrel. Seeing her now, and still desperate to taste that joy, he decided to try one more time. He drove her away with harsh words and threatening gestures. She left this time, vowing never to see him again. The next morning, Tredor regretted what he had done. He rode back to Javik, but the lady would not receive him and ordered her servants to chase him away across the drawbridge and over the hill. Jimmy fled back in his chamber and had collapsed and started to cry. He had made a terrible mistake. Over the next year, unable to see his lady, he experienced an absence, the terrible absence that can only inflame love. He wrote one of his most beautiful poems, My Song Ascends for Mercy, praying. And he sent many letters to Jima, explaining what he had done and begging forgiveness. After a great deal of this, Lady Jima, remembering his beautiful song, his handsome figure, and his skills in dancing and falconry, found herself yearning to have him back. As penance for his cruelty, she ordered him to remove the nail from the little finger of his right hand and to send it to her with a poem describing his misery. He did as she asked. Finally, Jima was able to taste the ultimate sensation of reconciliation, even surpassing that of his friend Pierre. Trying to discover the joys of reconciliation, Jima inadvertently experienced the truth of the law of absence and presence, and the start of an affair. You need to heighten your presence in the eyes of others. If your absence yourself too early, you may be forgiven. But once your lover's emotions are engaged and the feelings of love has crystallized, absence inflames and incites. Given no reason for your absence excites even more. The only person assumes he or she is at fault. While you are away, the lover's imagination takes flight, and stimulated imagination cannot help but make love grow stronger. Conversely, the more Jima pursued Jimmy, the less he loved her. She had become too present, too accessible, leaving no room for his imagination and fancy, so that his feelings were suffocating. When she finally stopped sending messengers, he was able to breathe again and to return to his plan. With withdrawals, what became scarce suddenly seems to deserve our respect and honor. What stays too long inundating us is with its presence make us disdain it. In the Middle Ages, ladies were constantly putting their knights through trials of love, sending them on some long, arduous quest, all to create a pattern of absence and presence. Indeed, Jima not left his lady in the first place, she might have been forced to send him away, creating an absence of her own. Absence diminished minor passions and inflamed greater ones. As the wind douses a candle and fans a fire. For many centuries, the Assyrians ruled Upper Asia with an iron fist. In the 8th century, however, the people of Media, now northwestern Iran, revolted against them, and finally broke free. Now that Medes had to establish a new government, determined to avoid any form of despotism, they refused to give up ultimate power to any man or to establish a monarchy. Without a leader, however, the country soon fell into chaos and fracture into some small kingdoms, with villages fighting against villages. In one such village lived a man named Deioces, who began to make a name for himself for fair dealing and the ability to settle disputes. He did this successfully, in fact, that soon any legal conflict in the area was brought to him, and his power increased throughout the land. The law had fallen into disrepute. The judges were corrupt, and no one trusted their cases to the courts anymore, resorting to violence instead. When news spread of Deioces' wisdom, incorruptibility, and unshakable impartiality, Median villages far and wide turned to him to settle all manners of cases. Soon he became the sole arbiter of justice in the land. At the height of his power, Deioces suddenly decided he had had enough. He would no longer sit in the chair of judgment, would hear no more suits, settle no more disputes between brothers and brothers, villages and village. Complaining that he was spending so much time dealing with the country, once again descended into chaos. With the sudden withdrawal of power, arbiter like Deio's crime increases and contempt for the law was never greater. The Medes held a meeting of all villages to decide how to get out of this predicament. "We cannot continue to live in this country under these conditions," said one tribal leader. "Let us appoint one of our one number to rule so that we can live under orderly government rather than losing our homes altogether in this present chaos." And so, despite all that Medes had suffered under the Syrian despotism, they decided to set up a monarchy and name a king. And the man they most wanted to rule, of course, was fair-minded Deioces. He was hard to convince, for he wanted nothing to do with the villages infighting and bickering. But the Medes begged and pleaded. Without him, the country had descended into a state of lawlessness. Deioces finally agreed. Yet he also imposed conditions. An enormous palace was to be constructed for him. He was to be provided with bodyguards, and the capital city was to be built from which he could rule. All of this was done, and Deioces settled into his palace. In the city of the capital, the palace was surrounded by walls and completely inaccessible to ordinary people. Deioces then established the terms of his rule. Admission to his presence was forbidden. Communication with the king was only possible through messenger. No one in the royal court could see him more than once a week, and then only by permission. Deioces ruled for 53 years, extended the Median Empire, and established the foundation for what would later be the Persian Empire under his great-great-grandson Cyrus. During Medes' reign, the people's respect for him gradually turned into a form of worship. He was not a mere mortal, they believed, but the Son of God. Deioces was a man of great ambition. He determined early on that the country needed a stronger ruler, that he was the man for the job. In a land plagued with anarchy, the most powerful man is the judge and arbiter. So Deioces began his career by making his reputation as a man of impeccable fairness. At this height of his power as a judge, however, Deoces realized the truth of the law of absence and presence. By serving so many clients, he had become too noticeable, too available, and had lost the respect he had earlier enjoyed. People were taking his services for granted. The only way to regain the veneration and power he wanted was to withdraw completely and let the Mendes taste what life was like without him. As he expected, they came begging him for him to rule. Once Deoces had discovered the truth of this law, he carried it to the ultimate realization. In the palace his people had built for him, none could see him except for a few, and those only rarely. As Herodotus wrote, there was a risk that if they saw him habitually, it might lead to jealousy and resentment, and plots would follow. But if nobody saw him, the legend would grow that he was a beginning of a different order from mere man. A man said to Dervish, "Why do I not see you more often?" The dervish replied, "Because the words, 'Why have you not been to see me?' are sweeter to my ears than 'Why have you come again?'" Everything in the world depends on absence and presence. A strong presence will draw power and attention to you. You shine more brightly than those around you. But a point is inevitable reached where too much presence creates the opposite effect. The more you are seen and heard from, the more your value degrades. You become a habit. No matter how hard you try to be different subtly without knowing why people respect you less and less. At the right moment, you must learn to withdraw yourself before they unconsciously push you away. It is a game of hide and seek. The truth of this law can be made most easily be appreciated in matters of love and seduction. In the beginning stages of an affair, the lover's absence stimulates your imagination, forming a sort of aura around him or her. But this aura fades when you know too much, when your imagination no longer has room to roam. The loved one becomes a person like anyone else, a person whose presence is taken for granted. This is why 17th century French Ninon advised constant faint and withdrawal from one's lover. Love never dies of starvation, she wrote, but often indigestion. The moment you allow yourself to be treated like anyone else, is it too late? You are swallowed and digested. To prevent this, you need to starve the other person of your presence. Force their respect by threatening them with possibly that they will lose you for good. Create a pattern of presence and absence. Once you die, everything about you will seem different. You will be surrounded by an instant aura of respect. People will remember their criticisms of you. Their arguments with you will be filled with regret and guilt. They are missing a presence that will never return. But you do not have to wait until you die. By completely withdrawing for a while, you create a kind of death before death. And when you come back, it will be as if you had come back from the dead. An air of resurrection will cling to you, and people will be relieved at your return. This is how Deoces made himself king. Napoleon was recognizing the law of absence and presence when he said, "If I am often seen at the theater, people will cease to notice me." Today, in a world with presence through the flood of images, the game of withdrawal is all the more powerful. We rarely know when to withdraw anymore, and nothing seems private. So we are awed by anyone who is able to disappear by choice. Novelist J.D. Salinger and Thomas Pynchon has created cult-like followings by knowing when to disappear. Another more everyday side of this law, but one that demonstrates its truth even further, is the law of scarcity. In the science of economics, by withdrawing something from the market, you create instant value. In 7th century Holland, the upper class wanted to make the tulip more than just a beautiful flower. They wanted it to be a kind of status symbol, making the flower scarce, indeed almost impossible to obtain. They sparked what was later called tulip mania. A single flower was now worth more than its weight in gold. In our own century, similar to the art of dealer, Joseph Devine insisted on making the paintings he sold as scarce and rare as possible to keep their prices elevated and their status high. He brought up whole collections and stored them in his basement. The paintings he had sold became more than just paintings. They were fetish objects. Their value increased by their rarity. You can get all the pictures you want at $50,000 a piece. That's easy, he once said. But to get pictures at $250,000 a piece, that's what's doing. The sun, it can only be appreciated by its absence. The longer the days of rain, the more the sun is craved. But too many hot days and the sun overwhelms. Learn to keep yourself obscure and make people demand your return. Extend the law of scarcity to your own skills. Make what you are offered the world rare and hard to find, and you instantly increase its value. Make what you are offering the world rare and hard to find, and you instantly increase its value. There always comes a moment when those in power overstay their welcome. We have grown tired of them, lost respect for them. We see them as no different from the rest of mankind, which is to say that we see them as rather worse, since we inevitably compare their current status in our eyes to their former one. This is an art of knowing when to retire. If it is done right, you gain respect you had lost and retain a part of your power. The greatest ruler of the 16th century was Charles, King of Spain, Habsburg Emperor. He governed an empire that at one point included much of Europe and the New World. Yet, at the height of his power in 1557, he retired to the monastery of Yuste. All of Europe was captured by his sudden withdrawal. People who had hatred and feared him suddenly called him great, and he came to be seen as a saint. In most recent times, the film actress Greta Garbo was never more admired than when she retired in 1941. For some, her absence came too soon. She was in her mid-30s, but she wisely preferred to leave on her own terms rather than waiting for her audience to grow tired of her. Make yourself too available, and the aura of power you have created around yourself will wear away. Turn the game around. Make yourself less accessible, and you increase the value of your presence. Use absence to create respect and esteem. If presence diminishes fame, absence augments it. A man when absent, is regarded as a lion because when present, something common, and ridiculous. Talent lose their luster, and if we become too familiar with them, for the outer shell of the mind is more readily seen than its rich inner kernel. Even the outstanding genius makes us use of retirement so that men may honor him and so that the yearning aroused by his absence may cause him to be esteemed. This law only applies once a certain level of power has been attained. The need to withdraw only comes after you have established your presence. Leave too early and you do not increase your respect. You are simply forgotten. When you are first entering on the world stage, create an image that is unrecognizable, irreproducible, and seen everywhere. Until that status is attained, absence is dangerous. Instead of fanning the flame, it will extinguish them. In love and seduction, similarly, absence is only effective once you have surrounded the other with your image, been seen by him or her everywhere. Everything must remind your lover of your presence, so that when you do choose to be away, the lover will always be thinking of you, will always be seeing you in his or her mind's eye. Remember, in the beginning, make yourself not scarce, but omnipresent. Only what is seen, appreciate, and love will be missed in its absence.